Emily Carter thought the old paper toy she found in her locker was harmless. A childish cootie catcher folded from notebook scraps, marked with faded numbers and strange symbols. But the first time she opened it, the paper whispered her name. By the second time, it whispered her death date. And by the third, it began to move on its own. I first saw it lying on the cracked tile floor of the old school building, a small, folded square of paper, its corners bent and edges yellowed with age. The hallway was silent except for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above. Dust drifted lazily in the stale air as I bent down and picked it up. It was a cootie catcher, like the ones kids used to make in elementary school. 4 folded triangles, each with faint numbers and words scrawled in faded ink. I turned it over in my hand, half amused, half curious. Someone must have left it here years ago. The paper felt oddly warm against my skin, though the room was cold. It carried a faint scent, something musty, like burnt paper mixed with copper. When I tilted it, the ink shimmered faintly, almost as if wet. I told myself it was just the light playing tricks. But the longer I held it, the more uneasy I felt. I almost put it back down, but my curiosity wouldn't let me. I slipped it into my backpack and left the building. That night, sitting in my bedroom, I pulled it out again. My desk lamp cast a weak yellow glow, and shadows flickered across the walls. I hadn't touched one of these things in years, but my fingers moved automatically, folding and unfolding the paper, making it talk, just like we did as kids. I whispered random numbers under my breath. The paper creaked with each movement, the sound strangely organic, like breathing. When I stopped, the cootie catcher's flaps rested open, revealing a word underneath the faded numbers. The letters were uneven, scratched into the paper rather than written. It said, "Tomorrow." My stomach twisted a little. I laughed it off. Kids probably used it for some kind of spooky prank. Maybe a game of dares or fake fortune-telling. But something about that one word bothered me. I left it on the desk and went to bed. Sometime during the night, I woke up to a sound, a faint, repetitive rustling. It took a moment to realize it was coming from my desk. I turned my head slowly. In the dim glow of the digital clock, I could see the cootie catcher moving. Just slightly. The paper shifted open and closed, with a soft, rhythmic motion. My heart thudded in my chest. I sat frozen, watching. It moved one more time before going still. I forced myself to turn on the lamp. The sudden light stung my eyes. Everything looked normal. The desk, the books, the paper. I reached for it, my hand shaking. It felt cold now, not warm like before. But when I looked inside, my throat tightened. A new word had appeared in thick black ink that hadn't been there earlier. It wasn't faded or scratched. It looked fresh, freshly written, the edges of the letters still damp. It said midnight. I couldn't stop thinking about that word the entire day. Midnight. It echoed in my head like a ticking clock, over and over, until it almost felt like a warning. I tried convincing myself that I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe I had written it without remembering. Maybe the ink stain had always been there. But deep down, I knew I hadn't touched it. I avoided my desk that morning, dressing in silence and leaving the house as quickly as I could. The world outside looked the same as always, bright, ordinary, safe. Yet everything felt off, like something was quietly waiting just beyond what I could see. When night came, dread began to settle into my chest. I told myself not to look at the clock. I tried watching videos, reading, anything to distract myself. But every few minutes, my eyes drifted back toward the desk. The cootie catcher sat exactly where I had left it. Perfectly still, perfectly folded, as if mocking me. I thought about throwing it away. I even picked it up and walked toward the trash can. But something in me hesitated. A quiet thought whispered in my head. What if that makes it worse? So instead, I placed it back and sat across the room, waiting. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator down the hall. As the minutes crawled toward midnight, I noticed the air start to change. It grew colder, heavier. My skin prickled, and a strange pressure filled the room, like the air itself was holding its breath. When the clock finally hit 12 wide, the lamp flickered once. Then came that same sound, soft, deliberate rustling. The paper began to move again. I sat frozen, watching as the folds opened and closed on their own, the tips of the paper twitching as if tiny fingers were pinching them from inside. The motion was slow and precise, like something alive was learning how to move. My heartbeat thudded so loud it hurt. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. The cootie catcher stilled suddenly. One flap lifted slightly, as though something beneath was pushing it up. I didn't want to look, but my body moved anyway. I crawled across the floor, reaching out with trembling hands. When I looked inside, the faint smell of burnt paper filled the air. The inside wasn't blank anymore. There were names written there, 4 of them. Each name was mine. The first one written neatly in pencil, the second in black ink, the third in dark red, and the last one smeared like someone had dragged a fingertip through blood. I stared at them, unable to breathe. Slowly, the red name began to fade until the paper was blank in that spot. I dropped it and stumbled back, heart hammering. I didn't sleep after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard faint whispering beneath my bed, soft voices repeating my name in the same rhythm as the paper folding, open and close, open and close. By the 3rd night, I was desperate to get rid of it. The moment the sun went down, I grabbed the cootie catcher from my desk, marched outside and set it on fire over the metal trash can behind the house. The flames swallowed it quickly, curling the edges until nothing but black ash remained. I felt a brief wave of relief, like I had just closed a chapter I shouldn't have opened. But when I turned around, the air felt heavier. I couldn't explain why, but it felt like something was still there, watching me from the darkness between the trees. I didn't tell anyone. How could I? Who would believe me if I said a folded piece of paper was haunting me? That night, I went to bed early, trying to pretend none of it had happened. But around 2 in the morning, I woke up. Something was different. The air in the room was colder than before, enough to see my breath cloud in front of me. The lamp on my nightstand flickered weakly, and my chest tightened when I saw what was resting beside it. The cootie catcher. Perfectly folded, perfectly clean, no ash, no burns, just sitting there like it had never been touched. I felt my stomach drop. My shaking hands reached for it, not out of curiosity anymore, but fear. It wasn't warm this time. It was freezing cold, almost damp. My fingertips tingled when I unfolded it. The words inside had changed again. They weren't names anymore. They were sentences. Look behind you. Count to 8. Don't turn the light off. The letters looked freshly written, black ink still wet in spots. I didn't dare follow any of the instructions. I slammed it shut and shoved it into the drawer, locking it inside. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. I stayed awake until dawn, sitting in bed, staring at that drawer. Nothing else happened that night. But when morning came, I saw something that made my skin crawl. The lamp cord had been unplugged. I knew I hadn't touched it. The plug was lying several feet away from the outlet, as if someone, or something, had pulled it out deliberately. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that maybe I'd kicked it by accident in my sleep. But when I approached the drawer, I saw thin streaks of black ink running down its side, dripping onto the floor. I opened it slowly. The cootie catcher was unfolded now, its edges spread wide like a flower blooming. On one of the inner flaps, written in jagged handwriting that looked like it had been carved into the paper rather than written, were 3 new words. You look too soon. The ink around the words was darker, thicker, almost glossy. When I touched it, it wasn't ink at all. It was still wet, and it smelled faintly of blood. After that night, things began to unravel. Days blurred into each other, and I started losing track of time. I'd wake up in places I didn't remember falling asleep. On the floor, at my desk, sometimes standing in the hallway staring at nothing. My reflection in the mirror began to feel like a stranger. The skin beneath my eyes grew darker, my face looked pale, and sometimes I swore I saw the faint outline of something standing just behind me. It would vanish the second I blinked. The cootie catcher never stayed where I left it. Sometimes it appeared on my bed, other times on the kitchen counter, and once, disturbingly, inside the refrigerator. No matter what I did, lock it away, hide it, throw it outside, it always came back. Each time, the writing inside changed. The instructions were different now. Some were nonsense, but others made me shiver. Stay awake until dawn. Don't look out the window. They know you saw. The words seemed to taunt me, daring me to disobey. At some point, I began hearing noises inside the walls. Light scratching, faint whispers that rose and fell like breathing. When I pressed my ear against the plaster, I could swear the sounds moved, as if circling the room from the inside. I tried covering the walls with blankets, stuffing towels under the door, anything to block it out. But the whispers always found their way in, soft and persistent. Then, one night, I woke up and saw that my room had changed. My notebooks, letters, even the pages from old books were scattered across the floor. Hundreds of small folded cootie catchers covered every inch of space, stacked on the desk, spilling from my drawers. The air smelled of old paper and something sweetly rotten. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stepped forward, crunching the delicate folds under my feet. In the center of the chaos sat the original one, perfectly clean and untouched, as though it had created the others. I could barely breathe. My throat felt tight, my body weak. When I leaned down to pick it up, all the smaller ones around me started to shift. The soft rustling filled the air again, open and close, like 100 tiny mouths whispering in unison. I froze, afraid to move. The original cootie catcher opened slightly in my trembling hand, as if eager to show me something. Inside, new words waited for me. This time the ink was thicker, almost clotted. It said, "Your turn to play." The moment I read it, a cold wind passed through the room, even though the windows were shut. The smaller cootie catchers began to unfold on their own, one by one, filling the room with a papery hiss. My vision blurred, and I stumbled backward. When I caught my balance and looked again, the writing had changed once more. Now it showed a date, today's date, written in bold, uneven strokes that bled through the paper. I didn't leave my room that day. I sat on the floor, staring at the cootie catcher in front of me as sunlight crept weakly through the curtains. The words from last night, today's date, stared back at me, smudged and bleeding into the paper. I felt hollow inside, drained of fear but too numb to move. My phone battery was dead, though I hadn't touched it. The clock on my wall had stopped ticking. Everything in the room felt suspended, like time had decided to hold its breath with me. As evening settled in, the shadows in my room began to stretch longer. I thought about leaving, just running out of the house and never coming back, but something in my body wouldn't let me. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was like a quiet pressure was pushing me to stay, to watch, to wait. The air felt heavy, charged, almost alive. Hours passed. I didn't eat or drink. My heartbeat felt distant, fading into the background noise of the house. When midnight arrived, I didn't even notice the clock clicking over to 12. What I did notice was the sound, the faint rustle, slow and deliberate, coming from the desk again. The cootie catcher trembled once, then began to move toward me. It slid across the wooden surface in small, jerky motions, folding and unfolding with a low, papery creak. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My throat was dry, my body frozen. It stopped at my knees. The flaps opened one final time, revealing words written in something dark and sticky. I leaned closer, unable to stop myself. The letters were messy, uneven, as if they had been drawn by a shaking hand. It said, Look under your skin. At first, I didn't understand. My eyes darted over my arms, my hands, searching for meaning. Then, under the dim glow of the lamp, I saw movement. Tiny shifting lines just beneath the surface of my wrist. My breath caught. Something was inside me. The skin rippled, bulged slightly, and I could see the faint outline of something folding and unfolding beneath it, pushing against the flesh like it was trying to break free. I stumbled backward, clutching my arm. My vision swam, and I felt dizzy, sick. The whispers returned, louder now, echoing from every corner of the room. They weren't just saying my name anymore, they were laughing, a dry, papery sound like pages tearing. I clawed at my skin, desperate to make it stop, but the movement only spread. Up my arm, to my shoulder, down my chest. My reflection in the dark window looked wrong. Pale, hollow. The cootie catcher was gone. I don't remember when it disappeared. I searched everywhere, tearing through the mess, but it was nowhere to be found. Still, sometimes, when I move my hand, I hear the faint sound of paper rustling from somewhere deep beneath my skin. Open and close, as if it's still there, waiting for me to play again.